folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and today is Tuesday, August the 9th, 2016, and I have the very great honor and distinct pleasure of welcoming back to the show. It's been a long time, but that is Mr. Brad from Full Spectrum Survival. Brad, you can find all of his great work at fullspectrumsurvival.com and as well as his YouTube channel of the same name. Brad, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Rory. It's good to be here and good to be with everyone.
Well, we got a lot of ground to cover, and we're going to get into urban survival. So we're just going to kick it off. You ready to go?
I'm ready. I'll tell you what, the perfect example of that is that, I don't know if you saw it yet, but I just did an urban overnight video. Okay, yeah, it was a fun experience. For a while now, I've been going out and just spending overnights in the city. This one I spent under a pretty large bridge and had a real good experience. But, one of the biggest questions that pointed to the reality of newcomers is somebody said, you're in there in an ultralight pack, which means it comes in at under 10 pounds before food and water. My pack's over 50 pounds. What can I do? So this is a guy who has seen the need, he's considered the problems, and he's prepared for it, but he hasn't practiced his gear. He hasn't tried to ruck 50 pounds around, because you ruck 50 pounds, unless you've been doing it for 2 years, you're going to be in bad shape.
Yeah, you're not gonna make it very far.
That's right. Or your mobility is cut down so low that you're not able to get up and move when you need to. And that's one of the biggest keys, is stay hidden and stay mobile.
Staying hidden and staying mobile, those are keys in an urban setting.
Right.
And most of the audience, about 70% of the people that are going to hear this, Brad, are in either very densely populated areas or on the fringe of densely populated areas where they're going to experience these types of situations. And that's where I like to focus, because when you're talking about 70% of the audience, that's a lot. That's a significant portion.
Absolutely.
The other 30%, they're already, they're in a rural area. They're somewhat prepared. They're somewhat, just by the
chance, right?
Well, no, just by the very nature of where they're located, they have to live a particular way. I mean, it's not like you can run, it's not like
to the store.
Right. You have to plan to go to the store. You have to plan to do this. You have to do all these things. So when you go and do those things, you might get a little extra.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
So as far as, tell me a little bit more about your urban overnight, as far as being under a bridge and coming in contact with various people, and describe the situation just a little bit.
I've got something that I prepared that I think I'm going to send to you that you can put on your site. I just prepared it last week. It's an urban evacuation planning grid.
Sweet.
And, it'll kind of let people really take a look at the steps that they can take themselves to, avoid detection and to make plans with their family, which is a huge deal,
It's a huge deal. I mean, and that's one of the things that people need to understand. And it's one of the things that I have to constantly remind myself of, is that I have to plan on my family. I have to plan on them not being prepared. I have to plan on them being almost dead weight and being really terrified of of the
events that are unfolding. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I have to be ready for that. I have to be ready more psychologically than anything else, because if my mind starts breaking down and goes to where they're at, then we're all in trouble.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So, as a lot of the readers know, in combination with survival and preparedness planning and wilderness survival and campcraft training here in the States and here in the U.S., at Full Spectrum, I developed and maintain, and I continue to use a higher level programming algorithm. I've told you a little bit about it, Rory. It basically feeds information to us in-house and trends that information to show the events that are happening in the world around us. This information that we see points to crisis events that are going to happen that won't give people huge amounts of notice. You won't really see it coming. So, to give you an example, say an extremist event takes place in your city, or God forbid, in a store that you're at. These types of soft target events that are happening around the world make you react so quickly. They make you and your family get out of an area. You might have to evacuate. You might have to do a lot of different things. But planning for that type of scenario, which goes back to what you just said, planning with your family is one of the most important things that you can do, because your family might not know what you're going to do. So let's say that an event rips you apart. You might know where to go, but what if your family doesn't show up?
Exactly.
Then you're going to be pressed with the question of, do you go look for them? Do you stay at a place they might know where to go to? Have you talked about this before? Do they know what to do? Are they going to react the right way when an event takes place? All these different things kind of need to be talked about beforehand to give everyone the best chance of survival that they can have. These types of plans of action in the evacuation planning that I drew up and that I'm going to give to you for your readers and viewers is that they're made under the threat of imminent danger. So they're made with the understanding that these actionable triggers go into place as soon as an event happens. But planning is really the most important aspect of that. And there's a grid that kind of takes you with a different step from your home to your city to your county, tri-county, state, and then country level, that you can kind of step your way out of these plans. And everyone is on the same page. Everyone knows what to do. The wife, the kids, if you're already with a survival or preparedness group, there's leadership that allows everyone to be on the same page. And just let me walk you through a couple of these.
Please do.
If an event happens at your home, very small, but certainly not, it can certainly still be a life-threatening event, is that a fire takes place in your home. What do you do? If you have children in the home, do they know to go outside, or are they going to try and come find you in the house? These very simple plans can be put into place on something that isn't a grid down scenario, something that isn't a nuclear event. This is just a fire in a house.
Right. One of my favorites, just so you know, that's one of my favorite things, is things that can and do happen every single day.
Yeah, around the world, no matter what.
Around the world.
Yeah, these things are happening. A gas leak, a fire, anything happens, and everyone needs to know to get out of the house, grab something if you can. If you have the ability to grab a go bag, or if you have the ability to get your cell phone, get it on your way out and go meet out in front of your house. So that's kind of the first step. That's kind of the ground zero of the evacuation planning, is from house to outside of your house. As these steps go from house to city, different events take place. So I'll give you another example. If a city-wide event starts to happen, a protest turns into a riot, which we see happen around the world. Fighting breaks out, gang activity happens. These things will take you outside of your neighborhood, because not everybody lives in the best neighborhoods. Not everybody lives in the best areas. You might attend a political protest that suddenly turns violent. The hive mind can make people do horrible things that they wouldn't do under normal circumstances. And you don't want your children there. You don't want to be there. You kind of need to know where to go and what to do to get out. So being able to step out of the neighborhood and know somewhere to meet in the city is another important aspect of evacuation planning. If you're forced to leave an evacuation location early, say that if something bad happens in your neighborhood, everybody in your family is going to meet at a grocery store nearby. But what if you're forced to leave that store because of an unknown chemical spill, or a gas leak, or an earthquake, or anything like that can happen every day? What do? The best thing that you can do is leave a symbol of movement. Leave a symbol there in one form or another that everybody knows means that you've been there and you've moved on to another location. And this would step them to the next location in your evacuation plan. And they would know, okay, you're safe and you've moved on. Without this, people are just going to wait at that location. We saw this happen in a couple of areas that have experienced flooding. People knew where to meet, and they went there, But then some people have left, they went back home. Some people went to stay with family or someone close nearby. And the rest of the family was just waiting there, you know, misunderstood as to what to do next. Or take, for instance, the tsunami. A tsunami happens, everyone is looking for their family because you don't know the scope and the encompassment of the damage. So you're looking for your family, but no one knows where to go. No one knows who to call. So having these types of plans in place, knowing where to go next, and maybe a relay person that you can all call that doesn't live in the same area as you, and you can give them your plans and tell them what's going on. That's the type of thing that can keep people from making bad decisions in the event of a crisis.
Now, I want to interrupt you right here because you just touched on something that is a key element, and that is communication amongst your family and your group. Now, you're assuming that in this scenario that cell phones are working, and I always assume that they're not going to work. So I have walkie-talkies.
That's right. Yeah, the communication tree that we follow starts with cellular telephones because everyone has one. But like you said,
Right.
that is going to break down.
It's going to break.
Then the next one is a corded line because cordless phones aren't going to, you know, the corded line has a much better chance of working. If the power goes out, your cordless phone isn't going to work. Then the next step is shortwave or ham radio. Then local is GMRS, and then finally notes and signals, and everyone kind of knowing where to look for those notes and signals.
Now, what's a GMRS? What's that?
It's just a publicly available but kind of stepped up walkie-talkie.
Okay.
So
that's the ones that have the long range.
Like they have a longer range, yeah, right. But of course, with any walkie-talkie, you're talking in a city environment or in a wooded environment, the range gets limited. It's mostly point of sight, you know.
Okay. What about a CB radio? Is that of any value at all? Is that something that people should consider, or is that more? What is that even an option, or should be considered as an option?
Currently, the GMRS radios are about the same as the CB technology.
Okay.
Now, CBs can be hugely beneficial. However, you would have to aftermarket boost the signal, which is currently illegal in the US because it interferes with local law enforcement and fire department signals. If you're in a rural area, you might be able to and not have any problem. But, you know, you still don't want to run that risk until that type of scenario took place that you would need to.
Okay.
You can get a shortwave radio, and that's a handheld, basically a handheld ham radio, and you'll get about 5 miles out of it. They cost under $100. Now, for this type of radio, you're supposed to have a license, but if an event happens that that you need to use it because all other forms of communication are down, of course, the legality of you not having a license becomes less important.
A lot less important. The safety and security of my family becomes paramount.
That's right, and helping people. You know,
helping people.
That's a big thing that gets overlooked in the survival and preparedness community. Is it's not just me and it's not just my family, but being able to help others. Because, you know, I believe that I was just talking with somebody and I said that bad people are everywhere, but not everyone's bad. So being able to help the people who truly need it and having the resources, the wherewithal, and the willpower to do it is a big part of crisis training.
Yes, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, and thank you for the reminder. So now, as far as we've gotten our family together, we've gotten out of the house, we've gotten to our first location, everybody's still together. We've got a flood that we're dealing with, or we have wildfires like what's going on in California, or we have rioting that's going on all over the world. We have one of these everyday scenarios that's happening. We're at our first location. Now we're still in the city, and now we've got to get out of the city, and things are really starting to break down. What's the next step, Brad?
The first thing that I would do is I would make sure that everyone in your group or in your family knows that if your location is threatened with social violence, pick a predetermined location or direction just out of that location for everyone to meet at. I'll give you a quick example. If everyone's going to meet at the grocery store nearest the house and there's the threat of violence, pick a location just to the west of that. And everyone knows no matter what, if there's the threat of violence, you pick a shaded or covered location to the west of that primary location. That way, under siege or under riots, people aren't just going and standing in front of the grocery store, because that could be a dangerous thing to do.
Yes, and that's excellent.
And the second part of that is that if you're at a location and your threat level continues to worsen, you move to the next evacuation location,
Okay.
no matter what. Leave your symbol of movement. So it can be anything. You can spray paint a letter somewhere. You can mark on a sign. A permanent marker fits perfectly in the go bag, and you can mark, a symbol that shows you were here and you've moved on.
Right.
That way, anybody else that was supposed to meet you there that didn't can know that you've moved on to the next location, and they do the same thing. But anytime there's the threat of social violence or violence at all, move on to the next location. That's the important part about having a tree, is you're not to a location and now you're stuck. Everyone knew what to do up until this point, and then it's a free-for-all after that. You never want that to happen.
Right. Because then everything starts coming unglued, and it's not healthy for anybody at all at that point.
That's right. And that makes a lot of bad decisions, because then
Yes.
as a husband or as a father, you have to decide, do you stay? Do you wait for someone else? Do you go back and look for them? It kind of breaks up your group and lowers your chances of survival.
Yes, it does. And we want everybody moving together as best as possible and staying as safe as possible. That's the whole idea behind this.
That's right. And we had touched a little bit earlier on urban survival.
Yes.
That is an important part of your planning. It's an important part of everyone's planning. And even if a person or a group lives out in the woods and is fully self-sustainable, they have solar power, they have the well that's off the grid, they have cattle, they have everything. At some point in time, they do go into the city. And it could be at that point in time in the city, whether at the grocery store or the doctor's office or picking up a friend or doing anything, that a crisis strikes. So just putting off urban survival, even for the people who live a self-sustainable lifestyle, is a dangerous thing. And then for the rest of the world, it's just a part of life. A crisis is likely to strike while you're in the city. Whether you're at work or asleep or at the dinner table or at church or anything else, a crisis might strike, and you have to get out of the city from that point forward. So urban survival is a thought process and a pattern of decision making that has its own dangers that everyone kind of needs to understand.
And hopefully that's what we're bringing to the table right now, is that understanding, because things are going to be happening really fast, and it's going to potentially be extremely chaotic, even if there isn't the threat of violence.
Right.
Even if it's but if it's a situation where your home is caught fire, or you have, some type of regional natural disaster, or God forbid an EMP or something along those lines happens, or a dirty bomb. But really just looking at flooding or tornadoes or earthquakes, these types of situations, your mind is going to try to take over.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's going to run in 1,000 different directions. And that's where what we're talking about comes into play. And if we don't keep that first and foremost in what we're doing, then we're going to be completely lost. Or am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. Anytime that you don't have a plan, you've already planned to fail. And there's no getting around that. So many people, when they're faced with the threats that we see around us and the things that we see happening around the world, the things that you tell your audience about each and every day that are happening around the world, from economic distress to global criminal events. These things have weight to them, and a lot of people are faced with fatalism, and they say, okay, well, whatever happens happens, and they choose to be aware but fatalistic. But that's not healthy for them, and that's not something that they have to do. There are ways to plan. Communication, like you had said before, is the biggest thing. If you start talking with people about what they would do in a wildfire or what they would do in a tornado or an earthquake, it starts to open these channels of communication up where they've already had these thoughts before. And you start talking about the different things that you would do. And maybe your plan of action would meld with their plan of action, or maybe you would each be able to bounce ideas off each other. But don't feel like people are going to look at you strangely because you question what to do with your family in an earthquake. Now,
Right.
no one's going to look at you strangely for that. Now, of course, don't bring up, uh, you know, a martial law takeover event might not go over as smoothly as what to do with your family in an earthquake, but that
Yeah, you
doesn't
might
make
want
it,
to ease into that a little bit later down the road.
and that doesn't make it any less likely to happen either. You
Well, that's
could
true.
very well experience either one of those things.
That's very true.
And I'll give you an example. Right now, today, at the Pakistani-India border of Jammu and Kashmir, they are still under curfew. They've been under curfew for now, I believe it's 32 days. Constant fighting in the street. People are running out of supplies. Those that were lucky enough to have rice on hand, staple goods, and medicine are now being robbed by roving gangs of marauders
Yep.
who defy their curfew. They don't care. Criminals are always not going to care what they're told to do.
Right.
So they get together and they're using their arms and going door to door and taking what they want from people who are less fortunate and less able to defend themselves. This type of thing that's happening across the world can happen anywhere in the world. And look at the natural disasters of America's past just to see that. Criminals use the opportunity to gain advantage.
That's how you know they're criminals.
That's right.
They don't pay attention to the law, and they do not care about you one little bit.
And as an example of Jammu and Kashmir right now, some people had their medicine. Some people had their food on hand. Some were lucky enough that they had just planned ahead a little bit. But now they're forced to band together or risk losing it all. Had they had a plan, they would have been much more prepared for this type of activity. If that happens, of course, within our community, there will be more prepared people. And they will, those type of places will be avoided. Another example is in the civil war that's going on in Syria right now. There are entire groups and entire areas of otherwise war destroyed villages and towns that are avoided uh, by the rebels, and they're avoided by the government's military, because these people are prepared. They're semi-autonomous. Nobody messes with them, and no one can get in without a fight. And criminals and those looking to gain power will always take the weakest first. So your ability to prepare yourself already puts you ahead of the game.
Way ahead. And that's the whole idea. I mean, and we can look at also what's happening in Venezuela. I mean, in that whole situation, which we've been following pretty closely at the Daily Coin, and the how the events have unfolded over the past several months, and now it's hit critical mass. It hit critical mass about, I would say, within the last 6 to 8 weeks, and it's really deteriorated to a point now to where you have just civil unrest in a constant state because people are starving. There's no cash in there's very limited cash
Right.
in the country. They have uh, periods of the day where there's no electricity at all, and when they do have electricity, it's very very limited. It's very low wattage. So all of these things that start mounting as that stem from that are beginning to mushroom
Yeah, right. They're starting the seams are starting to unravel.
big time, and you're starting to see disease and illness that shouldn't be happening, but it is happening because of simply because of hygiene, simply because people can't shower on a regular basis because
Right.
there's no water.
Right.
And then the food situation is completely out of control because there is no food, and it's just it's an horrific uh, situation that these people are faced with every single day. So what Brad and I are talking about is not it's not some far off fantasy land. It's not some theory. It's actual fact. It's what is happening right now.
Right. Yeah. Nothing within the U.S. currently protects us from any of these things happening.
Not one thing. And if you think that the government is going to be there to help you, then good luck with that plan.
Right. Yeah.
Seriously.
They have their own interests in mind, and help will come at a time if it's able to.
If
But
it's able.
until it is, and until that time passes, they have their own interests.
Right. They have a family just like we do.
Right.
And their family's going to come before mine. I know that. And it's like,
Sure.
well, wait a minute. You know, the police are going to abandon their station to go take care of their family.
That's
period.
right. Yeah. It happens at every natural disaster.
Every single one of them. And anybody that's counting on that, good luck.
Yeah, right.
So if that's your plan, then you have no plan.
That brings up a good point about urban survival, and that's bugging in or bugging out.
Yes.
So you're either surviving in place, sheltering in place, or you're evacuating to a better location. What are your thoughts on the two?
Well, that is a great debate that I have with my wife on a regular basis.
Okay.
And fortifying and bugging in is not really an option.
Okay. Yeah.
We are in a highly it's the population density here where we currently live is off the chart.
Yeah, just makes it unfeasible.
It's unfeasible. I mean, and we have been looking and looking and looking for a place to move to get out of the way so that we have a better starting
that
point.
Option. Right.
Well, I mean, if once we do get moved, then it won't be a question of staying here and dying, because that's the option.
Right.
If we stay here, we will die, and that's the bottom line.
And something about that right now is that we are currently in a time of relative peace as far as day-to-day functions go. You can go to the store without too much fear. Granted, there is a concern with even going to the store, as the Islamic State leaders have called for more and more attacks on soft targets in the U.S. There is a rising concern, but we're still at a time of relative peace where you can go to the store without overwhelming concern. During this time of peace, as a community, we should each be using it to go camping. And if you go camping and you spend a weekend with the wife and kids out in the woods, you start to acclimate yourself to the needs of the environment. And you start to find what you need to survive on a day-to-day basis, how much water you're going to need, what type of food you're going to go through, getting used to the sounds of the things around you. Because I'll tell you what, staying out in the woods, a pig in the middle of the night on a night with no moon sounds an awful lot like a human walking up.
Wow.
And just getting used to these different things and understanding them and kind of breaking the stigma of preparedness as it melds with recreation is an important aspect of preparation for right now, because you can get out there. And if you are used to camping 3 times a month with your wife or your wife and children, going out and camping for a little bit longer during a crisis isn't that far of a stretch of your ability. And it's not a shock to everyone because you already have everything planned and your evacuation is just another camping trip. So that should be a big takeaway for people right now is that you don't have to make years and years of plans. You can just go camping next weekend and endure the environment, and you'll come back knowing that if something were to happen, you could just go camping again. What do you think?
I like it. I like it a lot. I think that is very, very good advice. And that is something that I will need to take up with my wife to, because it makes a lot of sense. It really does.
And you can have fun camping with the family. It can be a nice, fun experience too.
Yes, it can.
Now, I'll give you the other side of the spectrum, and that's that we have a friend in the community who has no choice but to shelter in place. He has no other options. So his entire plan of action is community based. Now, he lives in a semi rural area. He won't experience droves of people driving past his home to try to get to another location, but still, his only choice is to fortify that location and to stay there. For him, community is huge. And I say community, I mean within survival and preparedness, or within the aware, because he has other friends that are going to come to his house and make that their retreat, which will embolden his numbers and allow him to shelter in place. But he wouldn't have that if he didn't start communicating this within his group, and everyone knew, and then everyone can kind of shift their plans, and helping him helps them as well. So, even if you are stuck in an environment, even if you are stuck in an apartment complex, being able to act right away, you can better your chances until another better option arises, until it shows itself.
I like it. I like it a lot. Thank you very much. Well, Brad, I think that that's probably as good a spot as any to end or conclude this portion, because I'm definitely going to have you back on, and we're going to pick up this conversation as close to this point as possible.
Okay.
And carry it forward, because I think that the work that you've done is extremely important. I think that it's going to benefit a great number of people and potentially save a lot of lives if something happens, because it's very practical and it makes a lot of sense. And the only thing that we've done so far is gotten out of the house, and we've gotten to our first meeting point,
That's right.
and we have a long way to go from there.
That's right.
So, and we've already encountered an enormous amount of challenges just to get from these two first steps. So we got to
And I
get
think
out of the city.
that's right. And I think when I come back, I'd like to walk through a scenario with you,
Yes,
and we go through some of the plans of actions of actually what happens from the point that the event takes place.
sounds great. I mean,
And
and go ahead.
that type of forward thinking might spark ideas. Some of the listeners might have better ideas, and I would love to learn from them. So that type of, let's just talk it out and kind of go from there.
That sounds great. Find all of Brad's great work at fullspectrumsurvival.com. And he's got a YouTube channel of the same name. Brad, certainly appreciate all your time this afternoon and look forward to picking it up in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Roy, and thank you for everyone listening.